Welcome to the SoLoMo Show, a weekly podcast hosted by Corey O'Brien, the social media strategist at Heat and author of thefutureofads.com.
And I'm Adam Helway, CEO of the digital marketing agency Secret Sushi Creative.
Each episode, we discuss topics, trends, tactics, and tools related to social, local, and mobile marketing and advertising. Our goal is to give you the information you need to be a better marketer. Today is October 9th, 2012, and this is episode number 40.
In this episode, we're going to discuss how mobile is changing the way we vote, how Twitter is reshaping ads, Facebook testing the want button, and so much more.
How's it going, Adam?
It's going all right. You'll probably end up hearing how it's going every so often in the background. I've got a 2-year-old niece and a 7-month-old nephew at the house here, so somebody's watching Pirates in the background or something, because all I hear is these baby R in the background. So sorry to our listeners, or maybe it'll be something they'll like. We'll just have to record them and play them randomly throughout other episodes too.
There you go. Youngest guests ever on the SoLoMo Show.
Exactly. Who needs sound effects?
Well, one thing our young guests won't be doing in the next couple months is voting in the upcoming election. So, Adam, our infographic of the week actually dives into this year's election, which they're calling 2012 the year of the mobile election. Apparently, and I don't know if they just made this up or if this was widely known, but 2004 was the year of the blog election, 2008 was the year of the social media election, and now we've further evolved. 2012 is going to be the year of the mobile election. So what's your take on that? Do you think this is mobile's going to play a big part in the results of this year's election, or is it still a little early to be putting that much weight on the mobile response, mobile applications, mobile social networks, that whole deal?
I think if you aim it off of, so the last election, right, they call it the social media election, but really how many people were using mobile devices in order to interact with the social media? There were still quite a lot, but I think what they're talking about here, what's really tipping the scale maybe and making this year the official mobile election is the use of mobile apps and mobile advertising. And there's some really interesting data in here, and I'm going to let you go ahead and get to it, Corey.
Sure. So speaking of advertising, they said, on average, a typical campaign nowadays ends up spending more than $1 billion on advertising. That's across both of the leading parties, and I think even including some of the smaller parties as well. So of that $1 billion budget, they actually estimate this year that $54 million will be spent on mobile ads, which is a pretty significant number. That's, it's about 5% of the total budget, which up from, I'd imagine, close to 0% just 4 years ago is a pretty nice jump. They said a lot of that is actually coming through Pandora. Pandora is a leading channel that both candidates are going after, which makes a lot of sense. Candidates are used to radio advertising. They're used to that kind of message, that tone, that pace. And so integrating into Pandora makes a lot of sense. But big budgets, and I think it's really solid. One of the interesting things is they talked about Pandora and why it's a preferred channel, and they said things like with Pandora's mobile offering, you can actually do geo-targeting, so they can really go after those swing states and spend money, intelligently against the voters that are going to have the most effect on the overall election results. They also said things like you can do content targeting to actually go after a more specific demographic. So if you want an older audience, maybe you do classical music. If you're going for younger, you can sponsor the pop channel. So they're actually able to do some demographic targeting as well, which is really interesting. Outside of the mobile ads, they were actually talking about fundraising. So mobile fundraising this year is apparently pretty big, and a lot of the mobile donations are coming in via Square. So we talked about Square a lot in the past and really focused it on how businesses are doing business, both getting new users and also just, buying and selling things. But what they're talking about here is people actually doing fundraising on behalf of the candidates and doing so with Square. So I thought that was really interesting. They said, Obama raised $690 million so far, and 55% of that actually came from small individual contributions. And, they're saying Square really powers a lot of those small contributions. So it makes a lot of sense that as people are going door to door, they're trying to rally support, they can just bring their phone along with them and, gather money through Square. So a lot of interesting data here. And, as always, we'll include a link to this in the show notes if you want to dive further. But maybe, 2012 might be the year of the mobile election. We'll have to see how it all pans out. But so far, it's looking like mobile is playing a pretty big role in this year's run-up to the election.
The interesting thing I wanted to call out when you're talking about Pandora is that in all instances, in any research that I've seen over the last few months related to mobile advertising, that Pandora actually is in the lead. They've taken an early lead as the top, and this is not necessarily we're not talking just audio advertising, right? We're talking about any mobile advertising that you would find on Apple's network, on Google's network, on any of them. That Pandora currently is the leader, and so it's kind of interesting to see that come to fruition here with this information. I thought the interesting thing on this was how they talked about beyond the geo targeting that you mentioned, targeting people kind of in a way based on the type of music they listen to. And they were very specific. And they said, Republicans, for instance, listen to Kenny Chesney, George Strait, and Reba McEntire, which all are country artists, right? So it's kind of funny how that comes to manifest itself when you're looking at the actual information and data there. And then they say, well, the Democrats listen to Rihanna, Jay-Z, and Madonna. And so, users essentially can target by location and target directly by the stations or the artists and the type of the genres that you were just mentioning. And it's a pretty powerful platform to be able to advertise on. I would imagine Spotify would probably be a pretty good platform as well to do similar advertisements as well.
Yeah, the other thing, while we're talking about mobile and the election, Twitter actually talked recently about the results from the debate. So obviously the debate drawing a huge audience, a lot of people wanting to talk about it. And Twitter said that during the debate, actually 10.3 million tweets were sent about the debate specifically. So I'm guessing they used some sort of keyword targeting to indicate whether or not it was about the debate. But really interesting. People are, there's this back channel that we see during a lot of live events that continues to ramp up during things as prevalent as the debate. And, I'm sure as continued debates and as further events happen leading up to the presidential election, we're going to see more and more people take to Twitter and take to these mobile social networks as a way of interacting with one another. So definitely seems to be a trend and seems to be on the rise.
So speaking of Twitter, there was an interesting post that had come out recently on Read Write Web from Mr. Dan Frommer talking with Dick Costello. He's currently still the CEO, right? I know that he moved into a few different positions in the past. He's the CEO of Twitter, and they were discussing how Twitter is moving in the direction of monetizing themselves primarily by, obviously turning into a well-rounded ad network. And we've talked about that in the past probably 3 episodes, that we've seen this sort of shaping and morphing of Twitter to be much more consistent in its experience across all of its networks. And that's why, all of its applications, and that's why you've seen a lot of the, a big major change in a lot of the applications that have been released officially by Twitter. They have new folks that they have as platform partners. We talked about that a couple episodes back as well. But now they're starting to really make a go of creating an interesting bevy of options for advertising. You want to go over some of those things that were discussed in the post there, Corey?
Yeah, the overall idea behind the post was that ads aren't reshaping Twitter, Twitter is reshaping ads. So it was basically saying that Twitter has created their own ad formats, which is true and, isn't necessarily something I had thought about before. So it was definitely interesting to read. It felt a little bit forced. I was like, well, it's just the same ad in a slightly different platform. But it talked a little bit about, unique benefits of the Twitter ad system. So one was the idea that your ads are provoking feedback and that feedback happens directly in the channel it's presented in. So unlike something like a TV ad where feedback happens in these feedback groups and, after the fact they do polling, things like that to see how well a TV ad worked, in Twitter you can directly see things like favorites, retweets, hashtag tweets, replies, all of that happens.
It happens in real time, right?
In real time, exactly. It's telling you, hey, this ad is working or it's not working. People aren't responding to it. So I thought that was interesting. And also the idea that the ads are simple so that they can be created on the fly as events unfold. This was something that was really interesting. And we actually saw this, speaking of the presidential debates, PBS did something really unique. So it was kind of well quoted that Mitt Romney took a little shot at Big Bird and a shot at PBS and said, hey, the government shouldn't be funding things like this. And so what PBS did is they actually came out and Big Bird made a tweet, which was really interesting. Big Bird was like, oh, usually I stay up, but I went to bed a little early last night. Did anything big happen? Hinting at the fact that, Mitt Romney basically said Big Bird shouldn't be funded. But also, PBS took the opportunity to sponsor a tweet. So when anybody did searches inside of Twitter for PBS, their tweet was the one that showed up, and it basically, pleaded their case. It said, hey, we provide a lot of value, we give back to the community, all these things, click here to learn more. And they took advantage of that. It was something that they literally rolled out hours after the event and kind of capitalized on this live event in a way that other ad platforms aren't really capable of doing. So I did think that that was interesting, this kind of quick response nature of Twitter's ad platform.
Yeah, and I tend to agree with what you said initially about, it maybe not being revolutionary in the sense of the social media advertising landscape. You're really paying for the same content that you would normally put out there to have more visibility, right? Similar to what you might do on Facebook, where you would post something and then you're paying for it to have longer shelf life. In this sense, you're paying really to highlight it more than you might be able to if you were just to tweet something and then it just kind of goes down the waterfall of tweets and then disappears. They are doing some interesting things, for instance, with Nielsen, which I'd like to see them expand to potentially make available to everybody, where they have surveys that are available. And they're doing it only, again, directly with Nielsen at the time. But something like that's really interesting, where you could use surveys to gather information. And I mean, Twitter is a big crowdsourcing platform in a way where you can get a lot of sentiment and reaction and feedback and information from people very, very quickly. And so for them to be able to kind of take things that are a little bit outside of the current tweet, like, retweet, favorite kind of mode, and maybe add these other things that are a little bit beyond what the normal user is able to use, would be pretty interesting as well. What do you think about that, Corey?
Yeah, I saw this, and we'll actually include a link to this in the show notes. It's part of Twitter's advertising blog, which is definitely something that people should be checking out if you're at all interested in this idea of social media advertising. It's just advertising.twitter.com to go and view that. So, I follow this and I saw this post come up and they basically said, hey, we're announcing surveys. And I was like, well, the marketer in me is really excited about that. The user in me, less so. It seems like they continue to sort of stretch the idea of what a tweet is. And, now it's a tweet that links to a survey inside of the Twitter application. It's a little bit clunky. And I'm like, do I really want to be targeted by, surveys as I'm trying to use Twitter? Probably not. But hey,
it's almost like Facebook questions, right? I mean, that really is almost the model of Facebook questions, right?
It is. And, initially it is very Nielsen based. So it's, do you recognize this? Do you recognize that? And then they're using that to, basically say, well, we showed somebody an ad and then 10 minutes later they recognize the name brand. And so obviously that ad had an effect. Whether or not that's true, that's always been kind of up for debate, but they're trying. They're looking to build up metrics and prove the idea that Twitter marketing actually works. So again, the marketer in me was like, well, this makes a lot of sense. This is data that I'd want to know. The user in me may be a little less excited, but hopefully they use these sparingly. It's more of a sample size, and they're extrapolating data from that, and not allowing marketers to put these polls in front of hundreds of thousands of followers and basically like spam all of their followers at once with these types of surveys.
So I mean, really, what they're achieving is, again, that extra added visibility, and the ability to be a part of a more kind of open conversation. What I mean by open is in comparison to something like Twitter, where you might not actually see a piece of content unless you have some connection, whether it be I like that page or whether it be that my friend had liked that page, but there's some connection that you have to have. And in a way, they almost feel a little bit more obtrusive in that fashion, whereas the Twitter ads are a little bit more in line. They're part of the experience. And I mean, worst case, they're really at the top of the page when you do a search or when you're looking at a particular trending topic or something like that. They're not necessarily like inserted in the middle of of a discussion that you're having with somebody else that's, with something that's completely unrelated. I mean, do you think that the way that Twitter has done, I mean, the way I make it sound, it makes it sound like I'm pro ads on Twitter. I think that they haven't really become incredibly intrusive yet, which is a great thing. I've not yet heard them being really useful for, say, smaller businesses, or even affordable for smaller businesses. But I mean, I think for larger brands who want to get some visibility and are going to spend the money on something one way or another, they're kind of a no-brainer buy when they can see that the sort of feedback that they're getting. Again, there's so many ways to interact with a tweet. Are you pro Twitter in regards to advertising at the moment?
I think it has to be done well. So one thing they mentioned in the article is Twitter ads are designed to be human. It's basically content in a brand's voice, and it melds in with the content around it. So I thought that idea was interesting. And they even said the ads that work well are ads that kind of follow that guideline. They're done in a way that flows naturally with the other conversation. They're done in more of a conversational tone. It's not, check out this offer. It's more, like PBS did. They came out and they said, hey, we saw this debate and we saw this comment, and now we're responding and we're promoting that response. So I think when done in that way, it makes a lot of sense. I think Twitter has to be careful where they're showing ads and how they're doing the targeting, because I have seen a couple of ads that weren't really well targeted to me. I'm not somebody that responds well to like a fashion ad, and I keep seeing fashion ads in Twitter because those are the brands that have a lot of money to spend. So there is still a little bit of a giant sledgehammer when you only need a little finishing hammer, but it's a work in progress, and I think they're making steps in the right direction. They're certainly willing to try things. Whether or not they step over the line and kind of go too far with their advertising, I think is yet to be seen. But at least they're trying new things. They're trying to figure out what's going to work well to drive value both for the advertisers and for the users.
It seems like a good tip for brands might be to really find a system that allows them to pay attention to the ebb and flow of conversations that are happening out in anywhere really in the world, whether they be news related, whether they be event driven, whether they be driven by your brand per se. But having an understanding of how things out in the world might affect the flow of conversation, and how you might have some level of connection with that conversation. So that way you could naturally blend into that. I think you already mentioned Big Bird, and I don't remember if it was it PBS that went ahead and did the promoted tweet or whatever it was.
Yeah, PBS.
Okay, and so they had to have been paying attention, and it had to have been enough on their mind for them to say, we see this as being a great conversation that is going to explode on the web. Maybe it's as easy as having some alerts on their social media monitoring tool that says, look, if we get a certain amount of tweets per second or per minute or per hour related to a particular topic that has PBS in it or Sesame Street or whatever, notify us, and then they're able to monitor and act quickly. Because just like you said, I mean, one of the biggest advantages here with Twitter is the ability for something, rather than a commercial, whether it be the radio or television, that obviously takes months potentially of time to get together and a large budget to produce. A Twitter ad is something that you could be really, really active in just a moment's notice and get out there and make it really a part of the conversation. So what do you think? Do you have any other tips on how somebody might be able to take advantage of a situation like this?
I think the idea of keeping track of the conversation, and when you see those spikes, getting involved and promoting then makes a lot of sense. It is something that's tricky. You have to put a process in place ahead of time. It's actually something that I'm working on for a client, putting essentially a how-to guide. Hey, when we see something like this, who are the people that we need to talk to? What are the steps that we need to follow to actually put an ad in place? There's a lot that goes into it. You have to be able to review copy quickly. You have to be able to write the ad quickly. You have to be able to have kind of a budget set ahead of time so that hey, there's dollars there that we can spend against. You're not running out to get budget when something like this happens. There's a lot of things that if you just spend a little bit of time thinking through ahead of time, when the opportunity does present itself, you can work quickly and know that, hey, we've thought these through and we're not going to stumble or, have some sort of costly mistake.
Which is something we'll talk about a little bit later on during the lightning round today, right?
Exactly. All right, so Adam, I heard that you had a chance to talk with Seth Grimes. Is that the case?
Yes, Seth Grimes. He is the president and principal consultant at Altiplana Corporation. He is an analytics strategist with Washington, D.C. based Altiplana Corporation and a founding chair of the Text Analytics Summit and Sentiment Analysis Symposium. What a tongue twister. And is the leading industry analyst covering text analytics. Essentially, he is the founder. I had an opportunity last year to go to his event called the Sentiment Analysis Symposium, and had a chance to talk with him as well last year, and wanted to get his input on the direction on, just let our audience know, what is sentiment analysis? Why should you be paying attention to it? And how might you get started? And I got to talk with him earlier today. And so we'll share that interview with you right now.
So I'm talking to Seth Grimes, and he's the president and principal consultant at Altiplana Corporation. And I met Seth last year. He's an analytic strategist. Say that 5 times fast, with Washington, D.C. based Altiplana Corporation. He's also the founding chair of the Text Analytics Summit and the Sentiment Analysis Symposium. A lot of big words and multiple syllables. And is the leading industry analyst covering text analytics. I got through it there, Seth. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well, Adam. Thank you very much. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is how businesses make effective use of information and data sources that are available to them, with a certain focus that we'll get into.
Yeah, I had an opportunity to meet you and go to the Sentiment Analysis Symposium last year, which we'll talk about in a second, and I was really kind of taken aback by the wealth of information that was there and the topics that a lot of people discuss. We've got a lot of social media analysis tools and monitoring tools and listening tools out there, and they really kind of brought the term sentiment and specifically sentiment analysis to the forefront. For our audience, many of them are digital marketers and social media professionals, can you describe what sentiment analysis is?
Sure. It's not so hard to describe because it's very much rooted in everyday human communications and interactions. Sentiment is how we feel about things, our mood, our emotions, and so on. But we're talking about an IT discipline here applied for business purposes. So I'll give you a definition, which is that sentiment analysis is a systematic assessment of the tone or mood of an item. But let me do a little bit of deconstruction on that. I said a systematic assessment. That's what makes it analysis or analytics, that you apply some methods that are kind of standardized, maybe certain algorithms that have been proven and so on. And I talked about an item that can be of a document or a message like a tweet or a review that's online, or it can be optimally the features within a document or a tweet or a review, the particular aspects of a product or the people individually and not just at a high document level. And then lastly, I talked about tone or mood. That usually means positive, negative, neutral. Sometimes it means mixed. But we can go beyond that with the technology that's out there nowadays to look at emotions such as angry, happy, sad that might be better aligned to things like customer experience, customer service, and support. So there's a short definition and a longer explanation of sentiment analysis for you.
And that's a lot to chew on there. And most people are usually aligning what they think of sentiment analysis, especially those who are new to just the term sentiment alone, to what you mentioned before, the tone, the emotion, and the feelings. I think marketers already kind of have an understanding of what it means to really understand customer sentiment or customer feelings about their brand and product and so on. What do you think that marketers have to gain from paying attention to sentiment analysis, and why do you think it's important?
Well, it's important because it's important to understand what people are saying in their own voices. Sure, you can have people fill out surveys and you can do polls where you ask them specific questions, but isn't it much more interesting to effectively eavesdrop on all the conversations that are happening online and on social to understand where problems might exist regarding products or services and detect them effectively and then also to identify opportunities that are out there. So that might be opportunities to cross-sell, make additional sales, design better products. Now, again, we are talking about a systematic analysis that can really help you manage all the huge volume and the very high velocity and the extreme variety in terms of human languages of information that's out there. You need automated methods in order to do that. But I will say, one thing about sentiment analysis that's great about it is that people can directly understand simply by reading the tweets and Facebook status postings and the reviews. We can each individually understand the stuff that's out there in order to get a handle on how effectively the tools are working for us.
And so you talked about an automated approach, and so like as human beings, as we're reading that content, we can usually derive some of the emotion and meaning from what we're reading. But you're talking about a broader approach, being able to scale this methodology, this approach to analyzing this data, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And essentially there are a number of components. One is to go out and get the stuff. That can be via some kind of crawling or spidering process, or you can get at the data through one of the data resellers or aggregators out there. Examples are GNIP, DataSift for social platform information, and there are a variety of others for news articles of various stripes. Then you want to do some filtering in order to reduce the flood to the stuff that's really relevant to you. And then you want to do that kind of analysis, which involves not only extracting sentiment applied to particular entities like the names of people and companies and brands and products, but also locations and other really relevant information that help you do some slice and dicing of the data to create aggregates and all of that kind of stuff. So it is a process, but there are tools out there to facilitate business people doing this kind of stuff.
Well, we'll talk about those tools in a second, or just maybe a couple of them that you think people should take note of. But how has the mainstreaming of social media changed everybody's ability to actually collect and make use of this sentiment? When I was at your event last year, a lot of people really used social media data as an underpinning for a lot of what they talked about. Twitter was a huge topic of just this ocean of information. How has the kind of just popularity and mainstreaming of social media made things better, if they have at all?
Well, really the point zero here, the fundamental point is that the mainstreaming of social media has made us all understand that we need to be listening, that there are people out there 24 hours a day all over the world talking about our brands, our products, and our services. We need to know what they're saying, as I said earlier, in order to detect problems early and handle them, in order to identify opportunities and take advantage of them. So the first thing is that the mainstreaming has made us aware that we need to do this, and then naturally the next thing is to try to do it systematically at large scale, and that means not just having individuals do the stuff. So our ability, there are tools that range from open source tools that are free that you can use, especially if you have some programming background, but that's not absolutely necessary in every case, to very high-end tools to collect the data for you and do analyses that are suited to your business purposes. So I started off by, thanking you about letting me talk about effective use of the information sources and data that are out there for business purposes. That's key, to work back from our business purposes and understand which data it is and which analyses and transformations we need to apply to that data, and how to present the data in order to enable more effective business decision-making. So it really is a process that requires some thought, but the overhead for getting into this is not high. There aren't a lot of barriers because there are a lot of good tools that are not so expensive, that are available as a service, so you don't have to install all the software and have that expense and delay and a big commitment. So it's not so hard to get into all of this, and I recommend to people they just try it because they can understand whether the tool is working for them directly because they can understand the source material, the material that gets pulled off the social web.
Well, where might you suggest that people take a look first then in order to get started?
Well, I'm a consultant, so I never give people a straight answer. It depends is my answer usually. And it depends on what business you're in. It depends on what role you have within the business. Are you in charge of customer experience and customer service and support, or are you in marketing and market research, or maybe competitive intelligence? Because the kind of needs that you have and the kind of tool that you're going to go for, they're going to vary based on the business function and the type of business that you're in. For that matter, there are other factors such as what language you work in. Yeah, sure, we're talking in English right now, primarily a U.S. audience and all that kind of stuff, but even in the U.S., people need to have Spanish language analysis. They need to often have French language in certain cases, especially if they want to get at immigrant populations. But then you go outside of the U.S. borders and people want to be able to apply these tools worldwide. There are more extreme cases like intelligence, military intelligence, that is, where you really have to get at a whole wide spectrum of languages. So really, the choice of tools, where to start, depends on the business problem that you have and the kind of information you're going to go after. Sorry to give you such a cagey answer there, but that's the true answer, and it's also a starting point for learning. The tools are out there; they're not so hard to find. I'd love to have people come to my symposium to learn about them, but they're not so hard to find, and you should be able to find one that will help you do whatever your job is.
So it sounds pretty much like you're recommending that folks step back for a second, as they should with really a lot of different things that we talk about on the show, everything from, strategy to marketing. They should step back for a second and think about what are they trying to actually get out of a tool like this. And there are different flavors of those tools out there. And so when they're keeping their eye open, when they're doing their research, that they can, ask those questions of that particular vendor or see if information is leaning in that direction through the information that's being, put on their website and through the vendor's marketing material and such.
That's right. We have to keep in mind that we have business purposes at hand, and even if the tool is low cost or even no cost, it still costs you time to actually try it out and use it, and it still costs you opportunity cost. While you're working with one tool, you are losing time if it's not the right tool. So really think before you act.
So, again, I mentioned that I went to the Sentiment Analysis Symposium last year, and you have another one coming up here in San Francisco, and I know you, I believe, do a couple of those events a year now. Why did you feel that there was a need for what some might consider a very niche sort of field event like that? I mean, I think I was a bit I didn't know what to expect when I went in because of it being, so focused on sentiment analysis. But I was quite surprised at kind of the richness of the discussion that was there. So why did you feel that there was a need to start an event like this?
Yeah, so the San Francisco conference is on October 30th. It is the fifth conference. Just like the previous ones, the day before we have half-day class, a tutorial on practical sentiment analysis that's oriented toward sophisticated users and developers. And then we have a new class this year on October 29th, which is an introduction to social media listening, which really is an introductory course. And we have been doing them now in both New York and San Francisco. And the audiences are a lot of overlap in those two cities, but a bit different. You get a lot more software companies in San Francisco that are looking to build these capabilities into their overall stacks, into their tools and so on. And then you do get a lot of end users in marketing, market research, customer experience, but a number of them are from online companies, a higher proportion than we get in New York. And we do get the agency types as well, working in media and public relations and all of that kind of stuff. But, we're not talking about a Dreamforce or an Oracle Open World that attracts tens of thousands of people, but we have attracted a, good audience within our targets. We're in the 150 to 160 range the last two conferences, and it's a really intimate type of conference in that it gives you a chance to directly talk to all the speakers who are there, as well as we have 9 sponsors this go around who are going to be exhibiting. But I've tried to create a conference that appeals to me, and I think that by doing that, I'm not trying to sell people software. By doing that, I think I can reach the needs of a large proportion of the people who will benefit from applying this technology out there in business settings again.
Yeah, I continue to be amazed at the kind of the growth of the industry and how you start to see it diversify so much as of late as products are starting to kind of come to maturity. And you talked about the conference being sort of intimate and small, but that's how everything starts, right? That's how something like a Dreamforce or whatever starts. And so I think it's interesting to be to see all the folks who were together from a lot of brands and companies that we know about leading in the direction of saying this is an important thing for us to pay attention to. We know that this is going to grow over time, and I think it sounds like that may also have been why you've invested your time into it. You believe in that industry and see a potential for it to grow as well.
Yeah, but you know, we're yeah, we're really at the leading edge here. We're not at the bleeding edge. We're at the leading edge, and so I'm actually probably going to be adding a couple more speakers to the program after some exchanges with people at Twitter and at eBay. And these platforms are central not just to people who are doing, from agencies and marketers. They're central to everyday people. The millions and millions of people who are out there on social media are using these platforms. And these speakers will be talking about how they understand the people who are their customers, namely all of the millions and millions who are using these social platforms. So really this sentiment analysis function is central to making effective use of these platforms, whether you're studying what people are saying on them or whether you're operating the platforms themselves.
Both as a vendor and as a user.
Yeah, and as a platform provider, let's call it, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, so on that note, how can people find out more about you, connect with you, and also find out more about the symposium?
Oh, well, yeah, thanks for asking that. Well, of course, you can go online to the symposium site, which is sentimentsymposium.com. If you want to find out about me, what I do nowadays is I use a single entry point, which is my Twitter account. You can go to Seth Grimes on Twitter. That's SETHGRIMES. And if you follow my profile, you can get to all kinds of other information. But really, that's the best way to get hold of me through Twitter nowadays. But I am all over the web since I've been using this in the online world, using social platforms for quite a few years now. So I really love working on social platforms, but as I've mentioned in a variety of forms of data analysis, and that's really where things are going here, integrating the social information with ecosystems of product and with the variety of enterprise and personal data, the whole spectrum of data, in order to create something, really great out of all of the mix of the data that's available. So I'm sold on all of this stuff.
Well, that's awesome, and I know that you set up a coupon code discount that we could use for our listeners that we'll share during the show. We want to get some folks out there. I'm going to be over there again this year, and I appreciate you making time for us today.
Great. Well, thanks a lot, Adam, and I'll see you in a few weeks at the show, and I hope to see some of your listeners.
Thank you.
So there we have it. I appreciate Seth spending some time talking with us, and I look forward to attending the Sentiment Analysis Symposium again here, actually in San Francisco, just I think at the end of this month. And he was kind enough to let our listeners have a discount if they wanted to attend the Sentiment Analysis Symposium. It's going to be again in San Francisco. I did not put the date, and that would have been great for you guys to hear, but it's sentimentsymposium.com, and the promo code is SoLoMo, SOLOMO, just like the SoLoMo show, and you'll get $100 off attending the conference. And I'd love to see you over there. For those who are into digital marketing and social media, there's a lot of great information very much related to likely a lot of what you're already doing in your marketing efforts now.
There you go. And that takes place on October 30th. And unfortunately, by the time this comes out, the super early bird pricing will probably have expired. But you can still get advanced pricing, which is kind of the before the day of the event. That's available through October 29th. And again, the Sentiment Analysis Symposium takes place on October 30th. So check that out.
See, that got your tongue twisted a little like mine did as well.
It does. There are a lot of s's and p's in there.
Now, this is a really, really cool topic, the next story. I don't even know how I didn't even see this. You caught this, you brought it to my attention, and we were talking before the show, and this is probably one of the most interesting things that Facebook has done in a few months, I think, right?
I think so. I think this could literally be Facebook's next billion-dollar idea, and it's part of it. There's a couple of things that you've got to imagine wrapping all together, but this is potentially the start of what could be, Facebook's really key to unlocking revenue potential. And what we're talking about here is Facebook testing a want/collect button. So very similar to what Pinterest is doing, Facebook is actually testing the ability for brands to offer specific items and then for users to click want on that item in addition to just liking that. And when they want something, it'll actually add it to essentially a wish list. You're building your own online wish list, and all of this is powered by Facebook. So really interesting. We've talked in the show in the past about when Facebook is going to move away from just the like button. There's so much potential in going beyond the like button into the want or the have or the would like to buy. All of these things are tremendously valuable for retailers, and it looks like they're giving it a go. It looks like they're trying it out. So this was something that TechCrunch had reported on. We'll include a link to that story. You can actually check it out. Implementation-wise, it's pretty simple. It's just it's literally a button. They tried it out with Pottery Barn. Pottery Barn was one of the launch partners. I think Victoria's Secret was also a launch partner.
These are many of the biggest brands on Pinterest, actually. So it's funny that they almost, in a way, mirrored the top 5 or 6 brands on Pinterest, right?
Yeah, exactly. And, these are brands that they sell reasonably priced items. It's not, these $1,000 items. It's things that normal people can buy with a normal budget. They've got a pretty varied catalog, so it makes a lot of sense to test it with a brand like this. But in the example that they give, it's a Pottery Barn. They've got this wreath, and you click collect, and it actually pops up a little menu, and you can add your comment and say, this would be perfect for the door of my house. And then you can add it to a specific wish list. So you can build wish lists in the same way that you build boards inside of Pinterest. They've obviously taken the Pinterest model and borrowed it and sampled it heavily and kind of learned their lessons from what Pinterest is doing. But it makes a lot of sense. Pinterest is having a lot of success with this, and we've talked a lot about how Pinterest is driving tremendous value. It's driving loaded clicks where people click it wanting to buy. They're in a buying mood, and that's something that Facebook has struggled with. People don't go to Facebook to buy. And, you're not really ever going to go to Facebook to just shop. But hey, if you're a fan of Pottery Barn and you see something cool pop up in a wall post, you might add it to a wish list. You might, add it to your consideration set and say, hey, somewhere down the road, I might actually want to buy this. So I think this is huge. I think that, if it works, if users actually pick up on this behavior, this could be a really big revenue driver for Facebook. And it could also be a really good tool for a lot of businesses, both large and small. There's no reason to think that, hey, as a small business, I couldn't tap into this and get all of my local customers to want and collect and add my own products to their wish list. What do you think, Adam? Do you think that users would actually try something like this, or do you think that Facebook's going to struggle?
I don't think Facebook's going to struggle. I think this is pretty awesome. I think that once the trigger is pulled, by Facebook across all of the businesses that are out there that might want to use this instead of the few that they've chosen initially, that a lot of people will jump on this. I mean, anything to help, potentially spread their products across to, especially if they launch something like this ahead of the holiday season, it would be enormous. I think it actually helps them solve 2 problems that Facebook has had in the past, and I've heard mentioned a lot about Facebook, that Facebook is a place for discovery, right? Not for people that are actually there to shop. So it's like going to a party and then suddenly being in the mode to shop. You're not there to shop. You're there to socialize with people. Then you go out to some other place like an Amazon, for instance, or even to of course, a search engine where you're actually in the mode saying, I'm searching for a solution for something, or I'm searching for a particular product. You're doing research on something you likely have an intention on buying. You're not there on Google for socializing. And so I think that's one part of the problem. And then the other is, and you mentioned this, I believe, as well, if not before the show you did, where the actual transaction happens through Facebook's, with Facebook's help. And I don't remember if that was only for the gift stuff that we covered last week, or if that was also the intention of these. But what it does is it helps kind of solidify Facebook as part of the actual transaction loop that does happen when somebody decides to go back to their little wish list and say, you know what, I decided that I wanted that wreath. from Pottery Barn that I put onto my wish list, and now Facebook can be a part of that equation, which is in a way measurable. In comparison to where a lot of people say, well, people go and they discover something, and then they might go and click on a post from Pottery Barn, or maybe somebody shared an image via Pinterest over on Facebook and discovered this. But once they leave Facebook, they left Facebook, and we don't know if they actually bought the thing, or if they didn't buy it then, did they buy it a week after they discovered it, and should Facebook be credited with the fact that you discovered it through Facebook initially? Which the answer, of course, is yes. I mean, you should consider that part of the equation. They may or may not have seen it had they not had the opportunity to bump into it through a Facebook friend saying, hey, check this out, I'm going to share my board, or look what I found on this particular site. So I think this kind of helps them close the loop in a couple of different ways. I mean, as a consumer, as a user, I think I'd personally end up using it. What do you think?
I think I'd use it for kind of the thing that you mentioned, which is bringing together the idea of wish list and the idea of gifts that we discussed in last week's episode. So, I mentioned before that wish list is sort of part of the equation that gets Facebook to their next $1 billion idea. We'll combine that with gifts, and that's the other half of the equation. So on one hand, you've got people building wish lists. This is items they'd like to buy, items maybe they, if they had the budget for it, they had the money, they'd buy for themselves, but they don't right now, so they're putting it on a, sometime in the future I'd like to buy this. And on the other half, you've got gifts, which is Facebook saying, hey, it's somebody's birthday, it's a holiday, it's an anniversary. You should actually, rather than just writing something nice on their wall, maybe send them a little something nice. Initially, it's things like gift cards and cupcakes and all of that, which is fine. And if you're just shopping for somebody and you don't know what they want, that's the type of thing you're going to buy. But what if you take the idea of getting somebody a gift for their birthday and suddenly you know exactly what you want? You're looking through their wish list. It's basically an anonymous shopping list. They've created the exact list of items that they want to buy. And if it's not a perfect list, Facebook can supplement that with other data that they have. So they can kind of look at your profile and say, hey, he likes the San Francisco Giants. Maybe we recommend some San Francisco Giants gear. Or he's a big, Shania Twain fan. There's a Shania Twain concert coming up. You can get him tickets to that. It's very similar to the personal shopping customization that Etsy does, actually. And Etsy does it powered by Facebook. So it's no surprise there that the two are very similar. But I think this idea of people wanting to buy gifts for folks and people being very explicit about the gifts that they would like to receive represents a huge retail opportunity. And if Facebook just skims a little bit off the top of every sale, that's, tons and tons of money. And hey, they're providing a service. They're putting, the buyers with the receivers, they're streamlining that process. So, by all means, they deserve to take a little bit of a cut of each sale. But as a business, you've got to look at that as an opportunity. It's Facebook doing a lot of the work for you. They're essentially marketing for you. They're putting your product in front of somebody right at the exact time when they're looking to buy, whether it's for a birthday or for a holiday. So I think this is a huge win-win for all involved. It's just a matter of, are we reading too much into the tea leaves, or does Facebook actually have this kind of merging of wish list and gifts on the horizon?
And the more that I think about this, I think there's so many different strategies that they could roll with on it, and places in their whole ecosystem that they could connect to. I mean, imagine, understanding enough about what somebody has on a wish list and really putting a strong data point to that. That's a strong signal of the type of things that somebody might want. And suddenly now you're advertising, you're almost in a way retargeting similar products to them, maybe from the same brand, maybe from the same product line, maybe from the same category from other folks. You've got brands now who are, so some time ago, I remember talking to a number of folks. We were talking about social commerce, and these were folks that were actually from some of the major social commerce platforms and service providers. And one of the things that they kept talking about was they were running into an issue where people just simply went to Facebook for discovery. And when they would have a store, because there's a lot of service providers that provide stores that you can install as tabs in Facebook and actually have catalogs of products on there, but the problem was they were seeing a very low transaction rate happening there. In fact, some of those companies had to change their model because it just wasn't happening in that fashion. And and so far, the way that they're showing these products being displayed by vendors is not that they have this, say, catalog per se. And I'm kind of looking a little closer because I want to see. It seems like they're actually showing them more like something that's actually posted on their page. So it's very similar to content that you would already run into with some of these brands. But the primary difference is that it's being identified as an actual product that you could purchase, and therefore you can put on your wish list. And so it goes back to the Twitter conversation we had before, where they're trying as much as possible to keep the advertising, and in this sense, almost in a way, their commerce as well, feeling as natural to what they've already had their users accustomed to as possible. And so you're not going with the intention of clicking on a store tab only to see the store. You're just kind of discovering things yet again. There may be a downside to that when it comes to the results or the expectations that an average brand might have, because they might be just, oh, great, we'll just push these out. And we may see an increase in product-based posts rather than engaging posts or humorous posts or whatever you want to call it. And so it'll be really interesting to see how this all shakes out once it becomes available to the other folks. There's just so many different directions that it can go.
Yeah, definitely something to keep an eye on, because a lot of potential, a lot of unsaid potential. It's not something that Facebook's been very explicit about. This Facebook Collections was kind of soft launched, and then TechCrunch picked up on it, and the gifts is really, I don't even think it's public yet. I've been trying to check it out, and other than going to Facebook's actual gift site where they explain it, I haven't even been able to browse the gift gallery and things like that. So it's a lot of speculation at this point, but definitely something that could provide a lot of value. And if we get additional updates, if we get a chance to try it out, we will definitely be revisiting this, because I think there's a lot of potential for small and large businesses alike to take advantage of this system.
So what time is it, Corey?
You know what time it is now. It's lightning round time.
Bum, bum, bum. You got the timer? Get the timer ready over there?
I do, and we are actually going to keep it Facebook focused, because our first story is Facebook related. So let's dive right in and keep the Facebook news going.
Let's do it.
All right, so this is Facebook's The Things That Connect Us video. It's essentially Facebook's first ad, and it's, I don't know, it's the best ad I've ever seen. It's a little far-reaching. It's kind of, they were going for something poetic, maybe along the lines of what, like, Levi's has been doing lately. Is it good? I don't think so. They're comparing Facebook to chairs. So let's give them the benefit of the doubt, and let's imagine what they were going for. They're basically saying that Facebook wants to be the foundation of everything. They don't want to be thought of as, you go to Facebook and you do Facebook things. They want to just be thought of as, Facebook interacts with all of the internet. If you're shopping, you push that to Facebook. If you're reading, you share that with Facebook. If you're talking about photos, if you're talking with your family, everything happens inside of Facebook. And, I think that makes sense. The ad itself, probably not the best execution, but at least they're trying. They're trying to promote Facebook and, become the world's chairs. All right, Adam, in 60 seconds or less, would you sit on Facebook's chair? Go.
Oh, man. Actually, I rewatched it again and didn't realize until when after watching it, that I had actually seen it before. And as I was watching the first 75%, I had to kind of go back to our notes and go, wait, what is this video about again? Because I couldn't get it. They are trying to be poetic, and they're trying to make Facebook a, metaphor for what chairs and other things that they feel were things that connected people somehow. Whereas one person sits, the next person gets up, and then another person. You're right. The execution wasn't as strong as it could be, but they were doing this to celebrate, I believe, their 1 billion users. I think they could have done it better. I'm not sure if they even aired this on TV at any point in time. So. But Twitter has done some of these before just for new features, and they've done an awesome job of as showing off things. Go check out the Facebook Stories videos instead. Those hit home much better.
I agree with that. The other video to check out, and I will include this in the show notes, somebody took the video from Facebook's chair ads and put the Carl Sagan's Pale Blue Dot audio over top of it, and it is spot on. I don't know if they had to do a little bit of audio editing to trim gaps or whatnot, but it's so perfect, and it's exactly what I mean. Where they were trying to get poetic and do this whole thing, but it's pretty funny. You listen to that, and you're like, that might have been a better spot. They could have just done that and then put Facebook at the end of it, and probably come out even better. But
with the chair thing, it makes me feel like they should have had Clint Eastwood doing the voiceover or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, man. So many memes have already come out of that. All right, next up is webplatform.org. 60 seconds on the clock. Do you want to take this one, Adam, or should I start off?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take it. Ready and
go.
So they discussed and I say they, meaning a lot of different blogs out there, we're talking about the launch of something called webplatform.org. And what the site is meant to be a collaborative resource for discussing web standards. It has folks, the W3C, who's kind of the governing or trying to be the governing body over web standards. They try to get everybody agreeing on certain standards and then release those standards for everything from CSS to HTML and many other things related to building websites. But they've also got some of the biggest players on board: Adobe, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, Mozilla, Apple, and the most important part about this is if you know anything about building websites, it's that there are so many fragmentations in the way that they are built and their standards that it makes it incredibly difficult to do things sometimes. So to see all these folks come together and try to build this resource up is actually a big step for the web in general.
All right on the buzzer. So 60 seconds back on the clock. My take on this is it's a step in the right direction, and it's got a lot of big names involved. I want to see it continue to get updated over the next couple months. So every once in a while you see a bunch of big names come together and they're like, we're going to band together and standardize things. And then that's the last you hear of it and the project dies. So I do hope this works, because the first thing I thought of when I looked at this is, man, this is going to make web development a whole lot easier. And I'd imagine that was weighing heavily on people's minds. So things like HTML5, things like WebGL, if you start to standardize things, it'll make things like developing sites and platforms for the iPhone, for tablets, for these, MacBook Air style computers. It'll make it a lot easier, because a lot of that stuff is very browser intensive. It's code heavy. And when you're having to write specific code for Chrome and specific code for Safari to get it all to work together, that gets a lot of confusion and complication in the process and makes things harder. So hopefully by all of them teaming up, it'll make mobile development a lot easier. All right, last lightning round story of the day. 60 seconds on the clock for this one. Ready and go. So this is a story we mentioned before. It's brands messing up on Twitter and the bad stuff that comes with that. So 2 tweets happened recently, both of which were pretty big mistakes. The first one was KitchenAid. KitchenAid, during the debate, someone reposted or meant to post something on their own account, but posted it on the KitchenAid account, basically saying, Obama's grandma knew that his presidential time was going to be bad. She died before he became president. Terrible tweet. They pulled it. They responded. They actually did pretty well with responding to it. The other one was StubHub. StubHub said, "Thank F bleep. It's Friday. Can't wait to get out of this stub-sucking hellhole." Which, man, that guy got out of stub-sucking hellhole for good, because I'm sure he was fired that day, if not that hour. Be careful with who you give access to your Twitter accounts. Make sure that they're not posting racial or anti-brand things when they're in their off hours. All right, Adam, 60 seconds. What's your take on the StubHub KitchenAid disaster? Ready? Go.
So the KitchenAid one was just incredibly, that was terrible, bad taste. The StubHub one is the one that I was laughing at the most, because this guy was just like, I'm getting out of here. This is a Friday. I'm going to go have fun this weekend. And then he, like you said, just permanently made that. You didn't ever have to worry about going back to that hell anymore. It really comes down to 2 people that had access to multiple accounts on the same device or the same platform or the same service or whatever the case is, and were so damn eager to be witty with their retort or whatever it was that they were saying that they didn't think, and they just went ahead and just jumped on and then hit publish. And it's one thing to do that with somebody else's account. It's another thing when it can damage your brand with folks that may not be, what do you want to say, forgiving, for when folks are doing that. So definitely pay attention to who has access to your account and what other accounts they have mixed in with that device or whatever.
Yeah, and that actually segues nicely into our action item for the week. So, our action item for this week is to develop an emergency response plan. And initially, when I was thinking about action items, I was like, maybe the action item should be restrict who has access to your account and figure out some way of having everyone log out at the end of the day. But I realized that, that's pretty hard to do. It's hard to regulate, make sure you're signed out, because we're sort of asking people to be always available, always responding to things. And so eventually just admit to yourself that something might happen. It's better to be prepared than to live in this sort of wonderland where you're like, oh, we're never going to post a bad tweet. Sometimes things just happen. And the best thing you can do is have a plan in place. The reason that I said KitchenAid handled it well is they responded quickly. So they had actually controlled this potential PR disaster within a matter of hours. They admitted to the mistake. They got on there. They contacted a couple of blogs. They said, hey, we made a mistake. Somebody obviously meant to post it on their personal account. We'll address that person. They will be dealt with appropriately.
That sounded really interesting, right? Yeah. They will be dealt with appropriately, and they will be put in a KitchenAid mixer, and they even contacted the Obamas as well.
Yeah, they did, and you've got to have that plan in place. You've got to figure out how far you escalate this thing. You got to figure out who responds. So does the brand account respond as a brand account, or does someone actually put their name and put their face out there and say, hey, I'm the person responsible for this account, I take responsibility for that leaking out? Who needs to review that message? Is it something where the social media manager can kind of take control of the whole situation, or are you the type of company that it needs to escalate all the way to somebody like a CEO to oversee the eventual message that gets posted out? I think that's something to consider. It's going to be different for every company. So again, think this through ahead of time. Also, make sure to put your plan down on paper. Don't just, think through it in your own head and say, all right, I'm prepared. You want to have an actual plan ready that you can share, you can distribute, you can make sure when, a crisis happens and code red, you pick up the red phone, everybody just pulls out their playbook and they know exactly what to do. Be ready to escalate as necessary. So, maybe it happens on Twitter and you can respond on Twitter and that takes care of it. But depending on the severity of the mistake, you may need to do something like release a press release or write a blog post, or, hey, if you really screw up, you might need to do a little homepage takeover for a while and just say, hey, we made a mistake. We're admitting to it. Here's what we're doing to fix that mistake, blah, 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 blah. The one thing that I do want to caveat this with, though, is don't overreact. A lot of times people see these things and they're like, oh my God, it's the worst mistake ever. KitchenAid is gone as a company. We're never going to survive. I think KitchenAid did well. They responded correctly. They went to channels like Mashable that they knew had a social media focus, but they didn't freak out. They didn't call up CNN and say, oh, we need to interrupt this news story and get our representative on. They handled it well. They escalated it to the appropriate channels, but they didn't overreact. And, within a couple of hours, the whole thing had kind of blown over. They said, hey, we made a mistake. People gave that to them. They said, all right, you made a mistake. You owned up to it. People will forgive if you kind of own up to it and apologize. So don't overreact. Don't make it a bigger issue than it needs to be.
I think that it's one of those things where Neo dodging bullets on the roof. You can dodge so many bullets, but one time it might just nick you, and you want to be prepared for that time where you're not able to dodge the bullet of something happening, whether it be somebody who has control of your account doing something stupid like we talked about, or maybe something else that happens. There's been a lot of examples in the past of social media fiascos based on people doing a variety of things, and having a plan in place like what Corey mentioned is always a good thing no matter what.
Well, we covered a lot of stuff today, but as always, we would love to hear from you. If you have questions, suggested topics, if you want to give us feedback, or even if you just want to say hi, there's a number of ways to do so, and we always love hearing from the audience. So if Twitter is the easiest way for you, feel free to get in touch with both Adam and myself. We're available at SoLoMo Show Or if you'd like to reach myself directly, I'm at Corey O'Brien.
And I'm at Secret Sushi. You can also email us directly. Both Corey and I check that email, and our email is solomoshow@gmail.com. That is solomoshow@gmail.com. We are, of course, on Facebook. We share a lot of things that we, whenever our show's about to go on, and you can listen to the live stream. We also share a lot of other stories that we've got going on. Same thing for Google+. And then we also have a Pinterest account that has a number of different boards, everything from our episodes to some of the interviews just kind of cut out of our episodes, and same thing with our tool reviews and such. So go over there, check out that board, follow it, and repin to your heart's delight.
And we say this every episode, but it's true now more than ever. We're extremely grateful for the audience. We really thank you guys for listening in. We hope you get a lot of value out of the show and appreciate it. If there's one request that we had, if you do get a lot of value out of the show and you're thinking to yourself, hey, I'd love to give some of that value back, I'd love to find a way of thanking Adam and Corey, you can do that by rating the show in iTunes. That helps us out a tremendous amount. It helps us get new audience, it helps us reach new people, and we tried to make it a little easier. If you go to solomoshow.com/review, it'll actually walk you through the steps involved in rating the show in iTunes. So it's a little bit of a confusing process, but just go to solomoshow.com/review, and there is a step-by-step guide for how to rate the show in iTunes, and we would really appreciate that. As always, all of the links that we discussed today, as well as links to the social channels that we just mentioned, can be found in the show notes. You can view those at solomoshow.com or in your podcast player of choice. If you look around, there should be an option to view show notes, and we always put all the links that we discussed that you can dive deeper. You can form your own opinions about these things. Sometimes, we just cover things broadly, and there's a lot more to the story, so feel free to dig in there and, really immerse yourself in the world of SoLoMo Show. And with that, we will call this episode a wrap, and hope you come back next week for another great episode of the SoLoMo Show.
Take care.